Welcome to our webinar today, Preparing to Build, Building Committee Responsibilities. This is the third of a three-part series on building committees. We've dealt with selecting your building committee and structuring your building committee. Today we're going to talk about setting your building committee duties and responsibilities. You need to give them job descriptions and tasks that they are to perform. And this building committee or this webinar deals with that aspect of your building committee. We want you to understand as we go through this process in this webinar today that every building program that a church goes through is going to have 5 stages or phases. A preparation stage, which is where you spend a great amount of time with your key leaders, deciding what you're going to build and if you're going to build, and vetting the possibility of it, looking at your health of your congregation, pulling together and making certain that the design of your ministry can be clearly communicated to everyone that will be involved, examining whether or not you have enough money to move ahead with the building project, and then once you have all of that together as you as a senior leader and your senior leaders in your church, that you then formulate and move ahead with formulating your building committee. And so we've dealt with, how do you put all this together? How do you navigate your way through delegating to people in your church the responsibility to do the work of the ministry that is involved with the building program? The planning stage is where you and your building committee select your delivery system and your industry professionals, your design team, your construction team. And of course, design and construction, facility management is where you take care of what you've built. And so every process or every project has, you can divide it into these 5 categories, these 5 stages. And so there are key summaries that you have to answer, a summary of key questions that you have to answer when you go to develop your building team. Number 1 is, how will you design your team? How will you structure it? What's the culture of it going to be? What's it trying to accomplish? How will you develop your teams? How are you going to train and equip them, teach them, prepare them to do their task? And who are you going to put on the team? How will you deploy them? How will you activate, engage them to carry out their duties? And then how will you direct them? You have to continue leading them. And as pastors, we've got to answer these key questions. Before we get started, we need to know where we're going and how we're going to get there, and who we think ought to go with us to help us perform the task. A building program can be, and I think should be looked at, is no different than any other program that you're running in your church. You need to have all the answers and all the parts covered and in play in order to succeed. And so look at your building project as just another temporary program where you have to answer all the key questions. We deal with this in the structuring part, but let me show you as we talk about the duties and responsibilities is you need to develop your own organizational chart, a chain of command for your building team. Here I've given you just one, that is a building committee that is made up of 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13 committee members that really serves as your executive committee. Then there are subcommittees and work groups that are placed underneath those. What you're doing is you are delegating the work and the authority and responsibility to groups of people in your church. An overview of the structural parts of any building committee or building process: you're going to have promotion, publicity, communication. You're going to have to tell your congregation, your community, the local authorities, the industry professionals about your project from start to finish. Property. Someone is going to have to master the property that you have to understand fully what is there and all the parts of it, your existing property, so you can blend together what you now have with what you hope to build. Programming. This is everything about how you do ministry, why you do ministry, where you do ministry, who you do ministry with, what you're doing, how you're doing it, when you're doing it, where you're doing your ministry. It's your programming. Your plans, your blueprints, both your past plans of the buildings you've already built and the new ones that you're going to build. Production. This is construction or renovation, remodeling, whatever you're creating new, whatever its form. New construction, renovation, remodeling, refurbishing. Somebody's got to watch after that aspect of it. Provision. Someone's got to provide the industry professionals and the local authorities and your community and your congregation with the needed information, and they all need different kinds of data and information to help them carry out their task. The committee structure, the building committee is the decision-making body. They coordinate and orchestrate the process and the project. The subcommittees are the recommendation-making body, and they assemble the research and development into recommendations for the building committee. The work groups are the research and resource teams. They're assigned to different areas of the project. They assemble information for the subcommittees, who then make recommendations to the building committee. So if for a moment I can take Jethro's and Moses, if I can be Jethro for a moment, we have to structure and delegate and do player placement where we put the right people on the right team in the right part of the project with the right assignment, and then coordinate and orchestrate them together to maximize their efficiency and their effectiveness. If you want a successful project, then select the right people to be involved and structure it so that it can be successful, so that it can function correctly. And you need to know what the chain of authority is and what the role of each part is. That meaning your building committee, your subcommittees, and your work groups. An overview of the responsibilities, and I've broken this down so that you can know right off the bat. Here's a summary of the responsibilities of the building committee in the project. Your building committee is responsible for the money, for the funds. How much can you borrow? How much can you raise? What money do you have on hand? Cash on hand. What's your current property worth? How much debt do you have? How are you going to deal with that debt? They deal with the distribution of the money as you go through the project and the process. Someone has got to be in charge of cutting the checks, approving the change orders, and dealing with the purchasing. They've got to take care of the funds, of the finances. Functions. Your building committee has to be able to clearly articulate, concisely and clearly communicate every function of your church. Do not hold anything back, but that can be a rather lengthy document that explains the 24/7 use of your facilities. How does your church function on its campus? How many services? What is the methodology, the culture, the atmosphere? What is the philosophy of ministry? And you walk completely through the functions of your ministry. But someone's got to put all that programming together with exercises and be able to communicate that to everyone that needs that information. Another responsibility of the building committee is to understand fashions. I say fashions, I'm talking about the style of new building that you're going to build. I did another webinar that you can purchase and watch called Design Decisions. But an overall responsibility of the building committee is to decide if you're going to match your existing facilities in their aesthetics and their style, or if you're going to take the necessary time and funds to bring your existing facilities up to speed or match your new facility. So if you built your building in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, and you're for some reason going to change that style to 2010, 2012, 2015, then you've got to decide how you're going to manage that. But you also have to be able to articulate to the architect what you want. This means your building committee may be going and taking their phone or digital camera and taking pictures of buildings that they would like to have this style outside and inside and on the campus. You've got to make some hard decisions. Your building committee is responsible for the quality and the style of the fashions of the building. Then you've got to articulate your focus. What is the purpose of the new building? Why are you renovating or building on your existing property or on new property? Who are you seeking to serve? Is it your current existing congregation, or are there new people in your community that you're wanting to reach? You're wanting to reach the unchurched, the rechurched, the dechurched. Who are you trying to reach? What is the focus? The building committee has got to agree upon and articulate this to the industry professionals and to the congregation so that everyone can agree and work toward the same goals, the same purpose. You've got to narrow your focus to set priorities, and so you'll know if you have succeeded. Forms. Every church that has existing property is going to have information about that campus, both the grounds and the facilities, and documentation about it. You've got to collect all of that, and we'll deal in a moment in more specifics as, what does that mean? And then you've got to be able to clearly identify and articulate about your church family. You need to be able to understand and communicate who are you as a church. Can you identify who you are in your culture, your core, your code, how your church family thinks about ministry, what it believes are the key things it's gifted and called to do, its mission? You want to be able to define your personality and your identity as a church, your core values, and then your future. This is the vision for your church. What is God's vision for your church? You need to be able to articulate this very concisely and clearly. There needs to be vision clarity about where this ministry is headed and how it's going to get there. Because as you master plan your property and as you develop your construction drawings, you are going to take all of this information and put it together like the pieces of a puzzle. And your design team and construction team ought to want to work within your funds so that they can design and build the building so you can function as you believe you are called, so the aesthetics and style and the atmosphere of the building matches your fashion, that it's meeting the focus, the target group that you want to meet. Your forms are going to help them safely navigate their way through all of this so that they have all the information they need about your existing buildings and property. The new building needs to be in alignment with who you are as a family, as a church family. And then it's got to be the next step in fulfilling your vision, your future. And so the overall responsibilities of the building committee, this is what you're putting together. These are the decisions and information and priorities that you have to set and you have to decide on to help and give clear direction to everyone that is involved so that you end up with a building that is pleasant and helps you fulfill your purpose, and that it honors the Lord, and that it will serve you for years to come. And so here are some duties and responsibilities that you need to delegate to your building committee. Now, the complexity of the structure of your building committee, meaning how big is our building committee, how many subcommittees and work groups do we have? How you delegate all of these responsibilities and how many groups you're creating and giving them the work to do depends upon the size of your church and the size and scope and complexity of your project. No matter what you're doing, you're going to have to collect documentation that you have on hand, First off, all your surveys, the boundary survey of your property, topographical surveys, which includes where the utilities are. Where are they? Are they overhead, underground? And they're going to be underground and maybe some overhead. But where are they located? The rise and fall of your property, of your elevation of your land, your parking, your buildings, all these different things, anything and everything that is on your property needs to be identified and correctly located, because your civil engineer and your architect and your other engineers, everyone, the builder and everyone, is acting off of the survey. So you bring all that you've done, and just a heads up, your civil engineer and architect, your design team, is going to probably require you to have a more recent survey, boundary and topographical survey of your property. But go ahead and collect everything you've ever had about this property. Then any as-built plans of your existing building. An as-built plan is when you built your existing buildings, you started with an original set of blueprints or construction drawings. But as you built the building, you had change orders and made changes to the original plans and built the building just a little different. As built shows those changes in a completed set of plans after your building is completed, after it's finished. Previous master plans. If you have done as I would want you to do, and that was you master plan your property every time you go to build again. Bring those up and show them to your building team. Give these documents, collect them, because you're going to need to give them to your design team. Environmental studies. If you've done a phase 1 and then had to do a phase 2 and 3 environmental study to fix a problem on your property or in your existing facilities, you want to be able to give that documentation to your design team. They need to know what's happened on your property. Any deeds with restrictions and covenants. Soil tests that you've done in the past. Zoning restrictions that you may have, or how you're zoned. And any other documentation that is pertinent to your entire campus. You want to hand these and have them readily available at the disposal of your construction team, so they know what you've done and what you're blend that together, because it helps them move ahead with any restrictions or challenges or difficulty or special permissions that you need to get as you plan to renovate or build your new building. The next area is you want to collect data. Facility audit. Let's say that you've got 5 acres of ground and you've got 3 buildings that are sitting on your property, and you're going to do a facility audit. And the facility audit is broken down into 2 parts. But you want to master your property. Remember I said one of the key structural parts of any building team, building committees, was property. Well, here it is in some detail. There's the physical condition of your existing facilities and campus and grounds. Would you say they're in poor condition, average condition, or in good or great condition? But you want to know what you have existing, because you may need to address the physical needs of your existing property, not just your new building. You've got to steward all of it, not just part of it. But you look at your grounds and your facilities, and you look at the structural condition of it. Is it holding up fine? Is it compromised in some way? Is the roof leaking? Is the foundation cracking? Is it sinking? Are the walls, integrity of the walls and the roof and the foundation, is it all structurally sound? The mechanical, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, any infrastructure you've got for information technology, your audiovisual lighting and acoustical mechanics, all the systems, are they in good working order, or do they need attention? Do they need to be repaired, replaced? What is going on? You need to do a facility audit so you can give the thorough report on the condition of your existing facilities. The next part, now I said there were two parts, the physical condition and the functional use. The functional use looks at what people are using your building, when they're using it, how they're using it, where they're using it, what they're doing, and how they're doing it. So it's programming. You're taking your programming and providing the where, when, how, what, where, all the W's and the H. That you're going to explain the age of the people, because we apply a certain square footage to the different age, and then we have to apply your methodology, how you're doing ministry. For instance, if you're using round tables in your fellowship hall or educational space, the architect may apply 15 to 20, usually it's 18 square feet per person, but if you're using rectangle tables, then they're applying 12 square feet, maybe 10 to 14 square feet per person for rectangle tables if you're using them in your education or fellowship setting. So with this, they've got to know not only who is using it, but they've got to know how you're using it, your methodology. Now, they also want to look at your processes, your systems that you're using. It's the steps you're using to carry out your ministry. Sometimes it involves your programs, and other times your processes are more things that are involved with it. And then any growth projections. So let me suggest to you that you not just say, well, we expect our church to grow 3 to 5% per year. Let me suggest that you break down the individual ministries in your church and project out how you think it's going to grow. Maybe you say, well, in the first year we're expecting it to grow 10%, but the second and third year we're expecting this particular children's ministry to grow 7%, and third year 3%. And so however your growth projections look at, but you need to collect this information, because your design team is going to need to understand your church family and your functions. They are going to need to understand your future as to what you project, how it's going to grow and what it's going to look like. They need to know the focus, the new people you're trying to reach, and how they're going to come in and be assimilated into your ministry. They're trying to understand what they're designing and building the building for. In the business world, in the commercial world, in the industrial world, all of this is done on a regular basis. Churches, not so much. And so we want you to understand that there are things you need to do that your architect, who is dealing with the commercial world and the industrial world, is going to come in and deal with the church world and not understand why you don't have your act together. And so we're giving this information to you so you can understand how the design team is thinking and know what information to give to them. There are key decisions that every building committee is going to need to make. You have to decide what is mission critical, because it tells you what needs you're going to meet next and what kind of building to build. Whether or not to renovate and repurpose your existing buildings and build what new space. You're going to have to make the hard decisions about ministry priorities. Someone is going to get their needs met, and someone else is probably not going to get their needs met. If you can think of a scale or a balance scale, and on the right side is your wallet, and on the left side is your wishes, your wants, and your desires, your ministry needs. Usually what happens is that your wallet is not strong enough or heavy enough to balance out your needs, desires, and wishes and the things you dream about. So your desires and dreams, you have to be able to afford it. And it requires you to say, all right, we have 5 priorities. And you give those priorities in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you may find that 4 and 5 cannot be met in this next building project or renovation. And they're going to have to wait to the second phase in your master plan, in your site plan, in your future. Someone has got to make these key decisions and prioritize your money and your ministries. Where you're going to spend your ministries, money, and what ministries are going to be helped or served through the building project. It's just the harsh reality of life. Everyone has to have priorities. Total project budget. Catch this. There is a difference between a building budget and a total project budget. A building budget, your architect and design team should understand, and you want to make certain they understand, that the building budget is for the structure that they are building. The total project budget will involve all the cost and all the things that are inside of your total project. Meaning, there are design fees, number 1. There's site cost and site work. Number 2, there's the structure that you're building, the new building that you're building or renovating an existing facility, or building, building out a big box. The structure is a part of the total project budget. Make certain they understand that the budget for your structure is just a part of the total project budget. Then there's FF&E, furnishings, fixtures, and equipment and extras. Then there's pre-construction cost of permitting and testing and management cost and fees that are given to you for this test and that test and this permit and this permit. And then you have contingency funds. And so however you break down your total project budget, the cost of building the building is just one part of the budget. You've got to make hard decisions about your quality and how much money you're going in size and how much money. And usually a building committee can select 2 of 3 of the following: size, cost, and quality. You can pick the size building you want to build and the cost, but the quality will be dictated to you. You can pick the amount of money you want to spend and the quality, but then the size will be dictated to you. You can pick the size and the quality, but then the cost will be dictated to you. You've got to look at this and pick and make these hard decisions. Then you've got to select the team, the industry professionals that you're going to put together with the delivery system. That's the approach. There are 3 basic delivery systems that you select, that you can select from, and then they're hybrids of all of them. You can do the traditional way, where 60 to 65% of the churches built in North America are done with the traditional way. That's where you hire an architect to design the building, put it out to bid to selected general contractors, pick a bid, probably the lowest if they're all equally qualified GCs, and then build the building. You can pick the second one, which is done 30 to 35% of the time. Churches use design build. This is where the architect and the builder are under one contract, one company. It can be architecturally led. It can be builder led, meaning where the architect employs the builder or the builder employs the architect. Usually it's the builder who hires the architect, either as subcontracted or as a part of his company. You know, the architect is employed by the builder to design and build your building. Or you can use construction management. Construction management comes in 3 basic approaches. There is pure agency, where they're there during design and construction to manage the project for you, and the church is holding the contracts with the subs and suppliers, but the manager, the construction manager, is managing for the church, just like he would himself if he was the GC. Then you've got at risk. This is where the construction manager may hold the contracts or not with the subs and the suppliers, but he has given a guaranteed maximum price for the cost of the project. So he is at risk. If it costs more, it comes out of his pocket. Then the third is fourth party. That's where you have the builder, the architect, and the church, and then you add a fourth party, a construction manager, who's working in behalf of the church to work with the general contractor and the architect through this process. The building committee has got to make the decision about, are we going to just interview who we think we want to use, and we'll take whatever delivery system they use, and that's how we'll approach the building? Or are you going to select the delivery system and then go investigate who works within that delivery system and interview and select those industry professionals? You've got design decisions, and there are a lot of them that you have to make all the way through the process. And then you've got to select your funding options. Who are you going to borrow the money from? Who's going to help you raise the money? How are you going to go about it? There's all these funding options that you've got to make key decisions on. In doing this during construction, your design decisions in dealing with change orders and expenditure of money, from start to finish, the building committee is responsible for making key decisions. Let me give you some examples to apply what I'm teaching you. You notice that I have not listed out for you and said, well, you've got the following 6 responsibilities for any of these areas. So let me just go through some of these things, because your responsibilities that you end up giving, the job descriptions to your people, depends on how you break up and divide up and design your building team. It's going to look different from church to church and project to project. So there isn't just one way of doing it. You've got to take the principles that we're sharing with you today and through the other webinars, and you've got to design and engage your committee and to meet your needs, to carry out your project. It's unique. Each church is unique. Let's talk about worship for a moment. You've got to clearly identify how you worship, your methodology. You've got to talk about the personality of your worship services, the culture of it, the aesthetics of it, the atmosphere of it, the purpose of it, the philosophy of it. You've got to talk about the manpower that is used to carry out your worship, your programming, the mechanics of your worship, what instruments and equipment and tools and what all is going on mechanically. So as you talk about worship, you may end up with a subcommittee or a work group that is dealing with your special events that you hold in your worship space, your drama, theatrical, your music, both vocal and instrument. You're going through this and dealing with how your stage is put together. Then you got your audio, visual, lighting, and acoustics that's blended together with your drama teams, your music teams, your preaching teams, and you're trying to sort this out. Now, how are you going to set the people? Do you want to fan shape this or in straight rows? Do you want middle aisles, or you want to have side aisles and then multiple aisles? And so as you talk about the traffic flow, the lobby and the foyer and the gathering areas, in and outside of your worship area. So you may end up with your building committee delegating and forming 6 or 7 subcommittees, and then those subcommittees may put to work some work groups who are going and just getting seating options, quality, cost, availability, and you're working with a supplier or suppliers, and you're trying to get consulting to figure out what is the best way to seat people. A lot is dependent on this. Let me give you just one example. If you're a church that wants people to easily get out of their seat and out of their row and down the aisle or back to the back, at some point during your service, say during an invitation, then you've got to think about that. If you're doing dramas, don't you need to have a green room, a preparation room? If you're doing baptismal services, don't you need to have dressing rooms and restrooms? And, you've got to think through, what are you going to do if you're putting robes on them or some kind of coverage and they're coming out soaking wet? What are you going to do with that clothes? What flooring do you put down there? How are you going to coordinate, orchestrate this? Is it one way in, one way out of your baptismal area? Is it going to be on the stage, off to the side, or behind the platform, elevated and up? Or if you just sprinkling and pouring, are you just going to have an area with the necessary furniture and equipment there to the side, or is it portable? You've got to answer all this when it comes to the preaching. When it comes to all of this, the front end of your worship and the back end of your worship services, that you've got a lot of things to orchestrate together to break this down to your guest services, to how you deal with your guests, to your church family. If you're having church and you're having a children's time during your worship service, and you're bringing the kids up front and dismissing them to their children's church, what does that look like? So you start talking about this, you've got to break it down and give them individual responsibilities, job descriptions of what they're doing, the money they can spend, when they're to have their research and recommendations ready. So that's just one example. Let's talk about education. If you're doing children and teens and young adults and senior adults and all the different groups, and you're educating, you've got to be able to break this down so that you have gone to everyone who is touching your educational ministries and begin to gather the information. You may end up with 6 or 7 or 8 subcommittees and 3 or 5 work groups underneath this for a small project. What you're trying to do, I believe, is collect all the necessary information so you leave no stone unturned. So you are communicating the primary things that are needed and the secondary things that are needed to make your education fulfill your mission so you can complete and reach your vision. And so you're talking about furniture, fixtures, equipment. You've got your teachers and your workers who are supporting your teachers. You've got your superintendents and, your curriculum. And this is all a part of your ministry design. And it is involving, your building and your classrooms and your methodology. In other words, with your children, let's take just an educational building that is designed to serve preschool through middle school. And this is happening Sunday morning during your worship services. And maybe you have a collection time where you bring all your children together in groups, in ages. And they're meeting collectively, and then you're dispersing them to their education, then you're bringing them back for a collective worship time together, and then you've got an invitation time, and you're dealing with them as they're making decisions and learning, and maybe you've got a craft area. Well, you start breaking all this down, folks, and it ends up having lots of moving parts. And you want to decide how far you're going to break down and into what detail you're going to go in order to make certain that the design team knows your philosophy and methods and ages and curriculum and teaching methods, your furniture, fixtures, and equipment, what's temporary, what you're doing and how you're doing it as you function during the Sunday morning. You may end up with restrooms scattered throughout your educational building instead of one central location, all dependent upon your function. Then fellowship time. Well, let's take just a normal fellowship hall. And you're going to bring people in there in groups to feed them, to fellowship. but you decide you're also going to use it for your midweek children's activity. And then you decide, well, you know, we could have a couple of Sunday school classes in here. What you've just done is taken your fellowship hall, and now you're going to serve food, so you've got to decide what kind of kitchen, warming or full commercial or something in between, and you're feeding people in it, but you're also doing Sunday school in it, and you're also doing children's midweek activity in it. So now you've got removable partition walls of some kind, a kitchen that is at some level from just heating up food to full preparation, to serving food with all of its cleanup. Now you're moving tables and chairs and putting in children's tables and chairs. And then you've got Sunday school, depending on who you're educating in there. So now you may have desk and chairs with, like school desk, and you're going through all this function during the week. So now you've got storage. You've got to store this, and then the heat and air and lighting and electrical has got to be designed to carry the weight of all of this. And you've got all these different functions, and that's just in the fellowship hall. That's before we ever get to a family life center or a recreational center like a gymnasium, where now you're playing ball in the area, or having exercise classes, or teaching any number of other things, or providing a soup kitchen, or activities for assisted living people. You're bringing them on campus. And so as you go into this, you've got to break down your methodology, the manpower, the aesthetics of what you want, your philosophy of ministry, your programming, the mechanics of it, the culture of it. You've got to look at all of these different aspects and break it down so that you don't miss anything. Because if you leave out what you plan to do in that particular fellowship hall or educational space or worship space down the road, and they don't prepare for it, it's a problem. For instance, we had churches who said, well, we're building a fellowship hall, but we're going to use it temporarily as a worship space while we build new worship space within the next 5 to 7 years. Well, your design team needs to know that you're going to go from using this space with rectangle or round tables. Remember, 12 square feet per person for rectangle and 18 for round? And now you're going to put it into a worship setting where it's 7 to 10 square feet per person. So the height of the ceiling, the tonnage of the HVAC, your traffic flow, your restrooms, your staging, your lighting and acoustics and video, it's one day going to be used in this way. The box needs to be prepared for that. The infrastructure needs to be prepared for that. And so the future use of all this space is at play as well. Another example is recreation. With your ball fields, your pavilions. What if you're going to have RV parking for some reason? You're going to have cruise-ins on your property, or you're going to have large gatherings for invitational tournaments for softball or soccer or football or baseball or volleyball. Or you're going to do indoor soccer in a recreational area. You come to your facilities. You've got to know. If you're going to play indoor soccer inside your gym and not just basketball, or if you're going to run multiple basketball games for children at the same time, you've got to think about where you're going to set all the people, where you're going to park all the cars. If you're going to feed them while you're doing it in the gym, how are you going to get the food in there? On your ball fields. And you're going to irrigate the field. You got to think about all of this. They need to know what you're doing and how you're doing it and who's using it, when they're using it, and what your future use may be with new ministries or as the ministry grows, as your church grows. So in recreation, again, you've got all these different questions to answer. Let me encourage you, do a Jethro, delegate and orchestrate and coordinate and structure it so that it can be functionally successful, so that you can fulfill your calling, you can successfully fulfill your mission, so you can fulfill your vision. And your buildings are a tool to help you accomplish God's calling for your ministry. Administration. Don't build just 3 offices if one day you're going to need 6 and you're not planning on building any more space. Think through the philosophy of how you coordinate and orchestrate your pastoral staff and support staff and all the decisions there. Your building committee can be broken down into multiple groups to talk and investigate. Interview and take lists for your programming exercises from your support staff. Your custodial crew, we hadn't even talked about cleanup and maintenance of all of these spaces. Involve those people in this. The maintenance and custodial, not just separate buildings, but all the way through any of these areas, you've got to clean them daily, weekly, bi-weekly. You've got to maintain, repair, replace. You've got to set up schedules for all of this, and you've got to be able to have the necessary custodial area and maintenance rooms and mechanical rooms to make all this happen, both in your buildings and probably outside your building for storage and maintenance buildings. And it's all got to be thought through in your master planning, so that all of this is orchestrated and coordinated together so that it makes sense. It ought to be a beautiful thing. Your overall campus of where it is going, if you put your detention pond or a building or parking in the wrong place and it prohibits the further development of your property and building new buildings or doing something different, and you haven't master planned it to think through it, that is a mistake. And so the size of your church, the size, scope, and complexity of your project, what you have existing on your property with your money, you've got to orchestrate all this together and then divide the work up into different responsibilities so that you can carry out the work and blend it all together, orchestrate it all together, so at the end of your building project, you are maintaining and caring for facilities that you are thankful you built them. I'm Marshall Shannon, your ministry coach and pre-construction navigator with Ministry Design Concepts and Ministry Design Training. You can reach me at marshall@ministrydesignconcepts.com. Our office number, 864-977-1632, and my cell phone number is 864-553-2070. We'd be more than happy to talk with you and help you by giving personal one-on-one coaching and pre-construction navigation to help you select and structure and set up the duties and responsibilities of your building team. May the Lord bless your efforts as you move ahead, serving the Lord and providing the necessary tool for your ministry.